Good afternoon, Jancine. Thank you so much for being with me. I feel like I was with you a few minutes ago.
Thank you, Kate. It's beautiful to be here.
For those of you listening in, Jancine very kindly invited me to an amazing event which was called Exploring End of Life Your Way. And that was put on by Preparing the Way yesterday. It was a fantastic online conference which really opened my eye to a lot of different issues around the whole end of life experience for people. And so I've invited Jancine along to have a little chat about a story she has to tell, but mostly to really introduce or weave together the end of life experience with the concept of honor, because in April we're honoring honor, where we every month here at SoulAdvisor we've got a different theme, and this theme for April is honoring. And what better to talk about than end of life and lineage and honoring people's lives and animals' lives. So Jancine, thank you very, very much for being here. Yeah. And where are you exactly?
I'm actually on the Sunshine Coast. So I'm up it's actually a beautiful day today. So I'm up in Queensland, little place called Golden Beach on the Sunshine Coast. And I have clients all over Australia, which is a beautiful thing.
I know I'm lucky enough to be working with Jancine personally too, because I just feel like the end of life is such an important stage in the wellness journey of anyone being on this planet, you know, pre-birth, birth, life, death, after death. So I really, really value the talks that Jancine and I have had so far about this topic, but we're kind of endless topic, isn't it, Jancine?
It is. And I love that you actually acknowledge that, you know, we're talking about it now in wellness in preparation for end of life, because I think what a lot of people compartmentalize their lives, and, you know, we talk about birth and then childhood, and then, you know, as we get into our adulthood and then our late adulthood, and then death is like this thing that seems to be very, very far away for a lot of people. Whereas it's really just this beautiful integration of our lives, and it can happen at any time, which, you know, is great to be, you know, prepared and organized for ourselves and for our family and friends.
Totally. Back in the day when I used to live up in the Northern Rivers, there was a fantastic workshop one could do, which was preparing your coffin and making it into a piece of furniture, so that that piece of furniture was in your living room for you to sit on as a couch or a divan or whatever else it was, or hang from the ceiling or put against the wall, so that you knew that that was an inevitable part of being alive, and therefore your decisions were informed by it, which I really, really loved. So we over here, us being SoulAdvisor being we, are really emphasizing want to really emphasize end of life as part of the wellness journey, and we feel it's very important. So we have written up a part of our website about end of life doulaing, and I'm going to ask you what that is in a minute. But I'd just like to share my screen and show people where that actually happens here. So this is us, SoulAdvisor up here, and you can see that we've written a whole lot of stuff about how death doulas can nourish you, practitioners offering end-of-life doulas, and you'll see our friend Jancine here, our one end-of-life doula so far, the benefits of death doulas and what to expect from a death doula session. Now, I know this is for all of you to have a read of later on, but I'd love to, while we have Jancine here, just talk to us a bit about what other words might be used for end-of-life doula. I know that there's a number of other ways of explaining that job title.
Yeah, so most commonly, I think people call us death doulas. And there are people like death midwives, I think, is a term that has come into the picture. However, we tend to relate more midwifing to childbirth, so that's not something that we use a lot. Death walkers, I know Zenith Virago in the Northern Rivers has a wonderful course on death walking, which is very much about walking alongside people at end of life. And then, of course, I myself use end of life doula because it encapsulates more than just the moment of death. End of life doulas, our scope of practice is so massive. It's from people living well who want to put their affairs and plans into place, right through to living with a terminal illness or the aging process, through death, and then we move into that after death care phase as well. So I tended, a lot of my work is with people once someone has died, and I will support them to have their person at home with home vigil, with home-based death care, and then going on to funerals and then bereavement and bereavement support. So it's a massive scope of practice, which is why we like to call ourselves end-of-life doulas.
And yesterday, only yesterday, I understood a little bit more about what you do, and I understood that death doulas or end-of-life doulas can specialize in one of 10 different areas of doulaing, isn't it? So it's really quite a, you know, when you start to break down the importance of each of those stages of life as you move towards the actual act of dying, and then afterwards, it's complex, it's fundamental, it's important, and it's really exciting that people like you exist. So yeah, so you work for Preparing the Way, have I got that right?
I do, yeah. So my other gig is to work
from me asking you about Preparing the Way. So, yeah. So Jancine, I know you work independently, but you're also really involved with Preparing the Way, which I think was where you received your training from Helen Callanan. Have I got that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I basically, when I started on this end of life journey, which was probably close to 5 years ago now, I literally exhausted Australian end-of-life doula training. So I've trained through most of the training for death doulas and end-of-life doulas. And the last training I did was with Helen from Preparing the Way, and the support and the resources and just the knowledge. And again, once the training was over, we're not finished there. Like, we go into this incredible group where we're fully supported. We get professional development happening all the time. And we really we collaborate with doulas so that we can support ourselves and our families the best that we can. It's an amazing training.
Well, I think, you know, that's so important, isn't it? Because it's not an easy journey, that end of life for most. And so having that support in your community that you can go back and debrief with and can hold you there must be fundamental to what you do, because it's a pretty hectic time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's probably one of the most important parts of the work that we do, is that we ourselves are developing personally and professionally. And, you know, we collaborate and we hold space for each other, because it is a very deep space to be in. And as beautiful as it is, and a lot of people say to me, it must be so sad working as an end-of-life doula, but I absolutely love it. There's just so much value and honor and integrity in the work that we do, that it's just such a beautiful space to be in. And when we can support others, you know, and then have them support us in return, it really is a beautiful place to be.
So I'd like to move from there into the theme of honor that we're exploring this month. And I think, you know, that honoring of somebody's passing and honoring of their role, their position, their moment in this sphere that we're all in is so important. Like, how do you, as an end-of-life doula, talk about honoring someone's life? What kind of language do you use when you're thinking about it or talking about it?
Okay, so when we talk about honoring someone's life, it's really about their life. It's around what they want at their end of life. It works with their values and their visions and what it is that they would like to have, you know. So when we talk with families or with the person that's actually dying, we make sure that whatever we do is around what they want, and at the same time addressing other people's agendas and expectations around that, and just being with them in those spaces. So to honor someone at end of life is to really get to understand what their life values were or are, and what it is that they value most. So whether it is spending time with family, whether it is wanting to die in hospital because that's where they feel safest, or whether it is they want to be around their families in the garden, or however that looks to them, it really is about honoring who they are in these times and building our plans around that.
That's a really important thing. Again, yesterday I learned that 9 out of 10 Australians haven't really expressed exactly what they would like to see happen for their end of life plans. So that's incredible. 90% of us haven't enunciated that properly to other family members, written it down, whatever you need to do to make sure that you are honoured in the process. So there's a big need for what you're doing, really.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really interesting because what I'm finding, especially in the work that I do, is that one, it's difficult for people to talk about because it's something that they're not comfortable with. They're not very comfortable in this end of life space. They don't want to talk about it. And if people do open up and want to share things, it's very much about, well, but I'll be dead. I don't care. I'll leave that to my family to decide, you know, and I get that a lot. And it's like, that's one way of thinking about it. But what about the family? What about your family and the grief that they're in, and the fact that they're going to be in this very deep emotional space and may not make the choices that you would have preferred? So let's have these conversations now and really start to open up and think about what it is that you would like to have in these spaces. Absolutely.
And, you know, like, it's also about the person who's passing on, honouring the people that remain, isn't it? Because so often people die poorly or make the wrong choices, and that just has ramifications for the next few decades within their family structure. Whereas if somebody, in my experience, my limited experience, might I add, thank you, of people passing on, it feels like when somebody's died with grace, it's such a gift to everybody else to be able to see how it's done properly and feel into the warmth and the connection that can actually happen around the act of dying when it's done properly. So yeah, I guess me as a yoga teacher, it's all about conscious behavior. You know, it's continually about how do we bring as much consciousness as we can into every moment. And so surely the passing on is one of those bigger moments, but I guess it's just the fear that, as you say, that stops people thinking into that moment and preparing in the right way. So yeah, it's great.
To really be able to actually, you know, talk through these processes, it not only brings people together and it gives us a greater understanding about who that person is, but it really changes the way that we grieve. It really changes the way that this process happens. It's so different to see a family when they've been able to bring their person home and to be with them for, you know, a few hours or a few days. It depends on the circumstances and what we can do within that space. But it just really changes the way that these people are able to grieve and process the death of their person. You know, being able to bathe somebody or dress somebody or anoint somebody or draw on the coffins or, you know, just be able to shroud or whatever it is that they want to do in those spaces. It actually just, it's such a healthy grief process for everybody. It's amazing to see the difference between people that allow the time and the capacity for doing that, and those that aren't prepared to walk into that space.
Yeah, and time for honouring, basically, Absolutely. Isn't it? Time to, you know, and when you've got that person in front of you and you're working with the person who's moved over, then it's really, it brings up the stories, doesn't it? It brings up that interaction in a very natural way that is sometimes lost a little in a funeral, in a traditional funeral, I guess. But the other thing that I always think about, you know, that statistic of 9 out of 10 people not saying what they want exactly or preparing for that moment of death, is we didn't have to a few hundred years ago because it was understood, wasn't it? Everybody knew what the process of passing on was about and how that would be handled by their society, and there was things in place that normalized it and helped people integrate that and honored the person that was passing on. We've somehow lost that. I don't know. You know, we could talk all day about the how and why, but you know, we to some extent have really, really lost that. So it's a kind of a new thing to say what you actually want to see happen as you pass on. Yeah.
It is. It's very, very new for us. And the interesting thing was, and part of yesterday, we watched this incredible TED talk by Beck Lyons around home death care and home funerals. And what she stated, and I just think it's just amazing, is that we have turned what was once a social event into a medical event. And it's very important that we have the medical model there to support us with the palliative care and what goes on in that space. But it's not all of the part of dying. You know, there's so much more to it than just the medical side of it. And there's the social aspects, there's the spiritual aspects, there's the, you know, a mental and emotional capacity to actually to do this. So, you know, we in a way, we're bringing back what we knew hundreds of years ago back to our society so that we can support each other through this incredible transition and process.
Yep. Well, let's hope it happens. Well, it is happening quickly. I seem to read in the Financial Times last year that it was one of the 10 biggest growth occupations in Australia, being an end-of-life doula, which is like, wow, okay, well, it's a bit of a flood. So I would love, because you've started to, but not finished, sharing the story of your beautiful dog that passed on a few weeks ago. Sorry, I can't remember his name.
Jackson. So Jackson's his name, and he was, and this is, you know, just to give you an idea around what we can do in this space of honoring. And I know that, you know, he's our dog, and our fur babies are as important in a lot of families these days as anybody else. So what we did, because he was 16 years old when he died, and I'll talk you through that process. He was such an integral part of our family, and not just like our family, our extended family. So he's actually my sister-in-law's dog. I grew up with him, and I walked him, and I cared for him. She's got 3 young children, and my parents also had a very big role in his life as well. So he was this intergenerational dog that brought this family together. So when he died, there was this massive, almost a gap that we really needed to honor. So we did this by this incredible process. I'm more than happy to share with you.
Well, I would love you to. So I know that you've recently presented this, and you've got slides to share with us. So can I just allow you to share the screen? And then we
absolutely
can listen back to your story.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I have started the show without sharing the screen, which is probably not helpful. So I'll share the screen first, and then I will share the show. So we'll play it from the start. So this is Jackson, and he's obviously our beautiful puppy, and that's my dad there with him. And this was on his last day at the beach. So this was all around ritual and ceremony and after death care. And so what we did with Jackson was, as being a very big part of our family, he was, we could see that his capacity was declining. He was having trouble getting up, walking around. He was quite elderly. He was in a lot of pain, and we needed to do something, or we felt we needed to do something, because he was coming towards end of life, and it was very uncomfortable for him. So we made the decision to euthanize him, and we decided to do that at home because we just felt that that was the most gentle place we could do this. And so on the Monday, I interviewed quite a few vets to find out who would best fit our family, and met the most incredible vet you could possibly ever imagine. And so we had from Monday until Friday to prep the kids for this big day. And one thing around children and when someone's dying is that they need to be involved. They need to be, we need to have conversations with them that are relevant to their age, and they are very curious. So the more that we can share with them, the more that we help their curiosity, the better understanding they have around end of life. So the first day, this was probably the Tuesday. We told them on the Monday that Jackson's last day would be Friday. On the Tuesday, I went around and I read the most beautiful book called The Invisible Leash. And it was about a little boy who'd lost his dog, and how the invisible leash connects us all. Even when someone's died, or even when his pet had died, he was still connected. So the first day I read the book to them, and I can tell you now, I still cannot read that book without crying. It's just such a beautiful book. And then the second day we went off to Spotlight, and we bought Jackson his shroud, which was just the most, it was a funny day. We went to Spotlight. It was closing down because they were moving. There was hardly any fabric. We couldn't find what we wanted. We ended up with calico, which turned out to be perfect anyway. And we came home with this calico, and I made the shroud ties, and I made one for each kid. So there were 3 little girls. One was 9, one is 7, and one is 4. And so they each got a shroud tie, which that afternoon we spent some time decorating. So they all got to draw their most beautiful stories of Jackson and what they remember most about him and what he loved the most. And so we spent the afternoon, as I said, decorating these beautiful shroud ties. And then the next day, oh no, that was his last day. So we did some other stuff through the week, which I'll talk about a little bit further on the track. But on Jackson's last day, Earthside, we did what Jackson loved to do the most, and we took him to the beach. And so there was my parents, and there was me, and there was my sister-in-law and the 3 kids. And we spent a good, probably solid hour and a half there on the beach, letting Jackson run and play with the ball, which was his absolute favorite thing in the world to do. Just spending some time with him, having the most wonderful time. And when we came back, poor Jackson needed a good old rest because he was pretty well tired after that big event. We all wrote him love letters. So we all sat down and we drew him cards and, you know, added some stickers and pictures and bits and pieces just to really share our love with him. And you'll see here, these little cushions. I'd actually, from Spotlight, had bought some fabric, and we made these little love heart cushions in remembrance of Jackson. And the first little cushion had all of our names on it, and that went with him when he got cremated. And then the rest of the cushions I created for each of us. We all got a cushion, and I threaded them all together. So we had them all strung up on one single thread. And that was the table that we had. We'd set up his little, was kind of like a little altar. So we had some flowers for him. We had a beautiful picture of him. We all had a candle, which represented our love for him. We had the shroud ties here that the girls had drawn with his shroud, and the beautiful cushions, and then all of our letters.
Oh,
I know, it was just beautiful.
I'm not sure I understand.
That was Siri. And so with the afternoon,
he does understand. Very appropriate.
Our beautiful vet, Dr. Dave, came at 3 o'clock that afternoon, and he came around and he spent a good solid half an hour just sharing some time with Jackson. And he could really see that Jackson was in a lot of pain, and the girls sat with him, and he explained to us all, and I think this was so valuable, was that we had chosen the right time to do this because Jackson was still able to do the things that he loved, but he was also in a lot of pain, and he could see that, you know, he was coming to end of life, and the quality of his life was declining to a state where he, in a few weeks or a few months, he would no longer be able to do all of those beautiful things that he loved so much. So we'd actually picked the perfect time to say goodbye to Jackson. And so once Dr. Dave had euthanized Jackson, and the girls were there through that whole process, he explained every step of the way what would happen. He allowed us time to say goodbye. He allowed us time to be with Jackson and love him. And then he administered the medication, which obviously put Jackson to sleep forever. We got to Shrouding, our beautiful boy. So we brought him around to the table where we'd set the altar up, and we wrapped him in his simple calico. And each of the girls got to actually tie on his ribbons with his flowers. And what we did was we took some flowers and the letters and we put them inside the shroud with Jackson. We put his little cushion in there with him, and we cut that little single thread, and we all got each our own little cushion. So we were connected to Jackson, which was an absolutely beautiful way of honoring him and us. And then the lady came to take him to the crematorium. And so I had the girls run out, and it was all in a rush because I hadn't thought about this beforehand. But they all rushed outside and they made this gorgeous guard of honor for him. And we carried Jackson out through the guard of honor into the car, and then she took him away to be cremated. And then that evening, we actually lit all of our candles and had we moved his altar inside. And the funny thing was that after it was all done, probably half an hour later, after the kids had finished crying and going through their grieving process, they were gone. They were off playing with toys. They were, drawing things. They were playing. And it was all of us adults that were sitting around needing to have a drink and a big old cry, because it was, they live in the moment, kids, and once that moment had passed, they were off doing the next thing. And it didn't mean that they didn't grieve Jackson, and they still grieve Jackson, but they were so part of the process that they were able to actually go and do what comes naturally to kids. And so once we'd done that, we actually, that night we had dinner and we sat down, and I don't know if you know the movie Coco, which is a Disney movie. So the story follows a 12-year-old boy named Miguel who is accidentally transported to the land of the dead, where he seeks the help of his deceased musician great-great-grandfather to return him to his family among the living and to reverse his family's ban on music. So there's this beautiful story that weaves throughout this movie about going to the land of the dead. And what happens is when animals pass over to the land of the dead, they turn into what's called an Alibrijie. So they turn into these incredible, magical, mystical creatures, and they fly and do all these wonderful things. So what I did the next day was I spent some time with the kids, and I said, you know, we'd watch the movie. And I said to them, what do you think Jackson would look like as an Alibrijie? And they said, oh, he would have to be like a dolphin dog, because he loved the water so much that he must look like, you know, a dolphin dog. So we all sat down and they drew these incredible pictures of Jackson as an Alibrijie. And that's now how they remember him, as this incredibly beautiful animal that lives in the land of the dead, that comes back once a year, because they have once a year, they have the Day of the Dead, where people can cross back over to the land of the living to say hello. But you have to have a photo of them, and I think you have to set up a it's like an altar, but there's a word for it, and I can't think of it right now. But there's this whole ritual and practice around these, you know, the Day of the Dead and these creatures coming back to visit us. So that's what we'll be doing that this year. We'll be sharing the Day of the Dead with Jackson.
How beautiful is that? That is the most lovely, lovely story. And you know, it's not so far from the truth. I mean, there's a Day of the Dead in lots of sensible cultures, isn't there, when everybody goes to the grave and makes special meals of the person that was loved so much, etc., and brings them back into their hearts fully. So, and honors them. And I think you know, for me, that honoring that you've just been able to show those children surely will have ramifications with every other death that they're going to go through as they move through. So what a thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is that they've had such a beautiful, healthy relationship now with their first significant death, that they're now able to go on and teach their friends and other families around what death can look like for them. And we're not done yet. Like, I think the weekend after next, we're actually having Jackson's memorial service down at the beach. So again, my parents are coming up, and we spent last weekend making scatter urns out of toilet roll holders. So they've been collecting toilet roll holders for the last few months, and we've decorated them up and drawn pictures on them and made them look beautiful. So we're all going to get a scatter urn with some of Jackson's ashes in it. So when we honor him at the beach, we'll be able to each scatter his ashes into the ocean to say our final farewell.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. You know, there's nothing more intimate than death. Well, I guess birth also, but it's such an intimate thing, isn't it? It really, really
Absolutely.
is.
Yeah,
and
it is.
You know, I just I feel like if we can do that properly, if we can let go with honor and welcome with honor, and have people pass through this physical sphere in a way that's honorable, then surely we're cured as a humanity. So yeah, you know, this is where we need to be working, to just help people understand that every single one of us has a strong sense of purpose, that we're a puzzle and you can't make the whole picture without that one bit. And so when that bit goes, you know, it's up to all of us to acknowledge what that bit has been and to find ways to fill the void. And it takes a community or a family to step into that, doesn't it? And really think.
It does.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that story, and especially on the back of that huge day yesterday of preparing the way for us all. And I really, really do hope that we are able to offer not only your own services, but a whole lot of other end-of-life doulas on there too, so that no matter where people are across Australia, they'll be able to easily connect through SoulAdvisor to some really genuine, well-trained, beautiful end-of-life doulas, and that we can offer that as part of the wellness journey. So thanks again, Jancine. And
Thank
is there
you.
I should be mentioning before we finish?
Anything else? No.
Or anything?
I think we're pretty well covered.
Great.
So thank you so much for having me, Cate. It's been amazing.
Truly, really. Thank you. And I'll see you again very, very soon.
You will. Take care.